Hi everyone, welcome to the Gateway API meeting for November 24th, 2025. Um, this, as always, is a Kubernetes meeting, which means we abide by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which means be nice to each other. And in this meeting, we do our best to raise our hands using the raise hand feature on Zoom so that we can not interrupt each other, although not everyone is always good at it, me included. So yeah, we could stand to be better. We do have a few things on the agenda, one of which is mine. So yeah, let's I'll get us started. Notwithstanding the permission changes we were talking about just before I hit record, if you do have things you would like to talk about, please feel free to make a suggestion on the agenda, and one of us with permissions will accept it. The agenda is open; anyone can add anything. Okay. So first up, did just want to I want to make sure we keep this at the top of the meeting notes. This is Flynn's board. Flynn is the release manager for the next release, so this is where things currently are. So yeah, everyone, please keep an eye on this board and try to keep it updated with things that you see. Yeah, we are working on Flynn and the rest of us are working on the tooling and stuff to move to this monthly experimental releases plus regular minor releases plan. Um, and we are doing our best to ensure that this is not too painful for everybody. So yeah, like although we are moving ahead with this plan, that doesn't mean that we can't improve it. So suggestions and feedback are still welcomed. Okay. Yeah, next one's me. I have been implementing backend TLS policy for Cilium, and I've found a couple things that I think, well, I know I missed. So yeah, the main thing is what happens when there's multiple target refs, but some of them don't exist. So right now, backend TLS policy allows you to specify multiple target refs. The target ref for a backend TLS policy is the service that the traffic is targeting. Um, and so if when you do this with just one, we have conformance tests that test that referencing a non-existent service produces like the accepted condition being false, and a resolved ref false, and some other stuff like that. And then there's a bunch of other tests around what happens when various cases happen, but we don't have any testing of what happens when there's multiple ones. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, so I put a comment here,
Yep.
but I don't even know if those conformance tests are working as expected,
So
because we don't have a way. So I guess this is kind of like the inverse problem of HTTP root of it's implicit. We went over this with some of the John's feedback on scoping to mesh implementations versus gateway implementations. But with backend TLS policy, it's basically like an implicit global scope. Like all
yep.
controllers should be watching
Mhm.
me because we're not
Yes.
able to specify only this controller is
Yep.
watching it. But I guess we sort of have a similar issue with like HTTP of like if you target a thing that doesn't exist, then the gateway class or the controller implementation doesn't know that it should be reconciling it to set that
Yes.
status.
Yep. So yes, that is the case. That is basically how we designed HTTP route. Unfortunately, like the you need to things need to be owned by an object by a controller, and the only way that you can establish ownership generally is by participating in a tree that where the gateway class is the root. And so if you mess up a parent ref and it doesn't point to anything that exists, then you are not part of the tree, and so your status should not be updated, must not be updated. Rob.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through. You've obviously thought this through more than I have. But what are the cases where the status is going to be different per target ref, other than like the most obvious one is this target does not exist, right?
Hmm.
Are there other ones that because like for example, we already have that in HV route where like there's a whole I mean, I know this is basically what we are just saying, but there's a whole list of backends and
Hmm.
one or more of them could be invalid. This feels similar to that.
Yeah, but the difference is in HTTP route we have a way to represent the sort of one or more are invalid state. That's resolved refs says,
Yeah.
hey, one or more of your backends are invalid. The problem is with backend TLS policy, right now there's no the status does not reference the target ref at all. Right. So we can say, hey, one or more of your target refs is invalid, but there's no way for you to know which target ref and because the target refs are like the most important part here, there's no way for us to sort of say because the status rolls up to the gateway, you can say, hey, currently the only way to handle this is you need to treat it as long as there is at least one valid target ref that rolls up to a gateway that you control, then you accept the thing, put the gateway in the status, and call it done. Like but because this also it also doesn't help the backend TLS policy is way more complicated because backend TLS policy refers to a service that must be used in the backend ref of a HTTP, which must be parented by a gateway, which must be owned by a gateway class. Now, what can happen is a backend TLS policy can refer to two services. Those two services can participate in different backends, in different HTTP routes, in different gateway classes, right? So,
Yeah.
and so when that happens, you like that situation is actually fine, right? Because you roll up to different gateways, and so the ancestor ref is different. However, if you have a backend TLS policy that selects two backends, one of which is in HTTP route A, one of which is in HTTP route B, and they both roll up to the same gateway. If the backend in HTTP route B does not exist, you have no way in the backend TLS policy to tell people about that because all of the status refers to the two hops above gateway. This is I think this is basically the root of John's feedback here about about this being user hostile because there's no reference to the actual target ref, which is the thing you as the owner of the backend TLS policy control. Right, like so you as the owner of the backend TLS policy control which service you are selecting, but you do not control like where that you may not control where that backend TLS policy ends up being used on the gateway. Now, is it a piece of information you want to know? Yes, absolutely. You need to know where your backend TLS policy is being used. But you also need to know that you've made a mistake, that you made a typo with the target ref. And right now there's no way to represent that. I think that we have two options. Well, we don't have very many viable options to fix this in the longer term. We can add target ref into policy status and make policy status be effectively policy status currently has a ancestors stanza that is the ancestor policy or the local policy status struct that does not have a reference to the policy's target ref in it. If we add a target ref into that struct and we say, hey, the ancestor stanza is effectively primary keyed by ancestor and controller name, which is today, and target ref, and that means that you can handle this case. You can handle the case that like you have multiple target refs pointing to the same gateway. It's a pretty edge case, right? Like it's a pretty edge case. It would be weird to do it, but if we don't define what happens when you do it, then someone's going to do it and be like, this doesn't work, or we'll end up with people doing it differently. So I actually think the best option for 1.4, given we're going to be releasing 1.4.1 very soon, is actually to say, hey, for the moment, multiple target refs in backend TLS policy are not supported because it breaks things. Like because you can't. So it's actually not possible for me to write a controller that handles this status correctly because you have to, basically what you have to do is you have to assume it is possible. It's really difficult because you have to iterate across all of the target refs, see if there's at least one that's valid, and if there is, then you have to go back and then you have to use that to go back and like re-impute the status. You can't do it by like iterating through anything. You have to iterate through check that everything is valid, check that the section names are present, and then you're treating different section names differently, because that's another thing you have to handle, because a single backend TLS policy can point to the same target ref but with a different section name, which is the port name. So like, this is all just because we've added a lot of different ways that you can specify targets, right? And so that just means that there's a combinatorial complexity explosion in ways that things could go wrong that we haven't spent enough time specifying. So like, our options are, we either specify what happens when things go wrong, or we say, hey, you can't do some things for the moment.
This feels, I don't know. It feels like there's a simpler path to me, and maybe I just haven't thought about it thoroughly enough. But if we assume that, just imagine with me my simple view of the world, and tell me that I'm wrong, because I'm probably wrong. But basically, let's just say that a gateway controller sees a backend TLS policy. It sees that it's targeting 10 different services. And in those 10 different services, it sees that 2 are relevant to them. It then just populates status and says, yeah, I covered it, right? And if any of these services are targeted by any gateways I own, I got it. Don't worry. Like, I'm watching this, I'm aware of it. This is like accepted, programmed, whatever, right? I don't think it really matters to a user, or to a user, if a gateway controller sees, that you targeted 10 services but only 2 are relevant to it. I don't think a user is going to care, well, these 8 are irrelevant, so I'm ignoring them. I feel like that's like providing more information than the user really needs to know. And so then, where I feel like the gap is the case that there's 2 gaps, right? There's the resolved refs one, or the one we've handled with resolved refs before. And second, the conflicts one, where you have like a whole bunch of target refs, and they overlap in weird ways, where you have like, I don't really know how you.
We've actually specified the conflicts pretty well.
Okay.
So the conflicting part is actually pretty well specified. Like, the target refs need to be distinct, which means that they need to target either a different service or the same service but with different section names.
Yeah.
One thing that we haven't specified that we need to is what happens if you have multiple target refs on the same backend TLS policy, where one of them specifies a section name and one of them does not. Because not specifying a section name means it should apply to all sections, all ports.
Yeah.
But so that's like, that is a conflict, but we haven't actually explicitly said what happens in that case, and we don't have.
But it's not really it feels like not really a conflict. It just feels like you're wasting characters, right? Like, if you apply it to the entire service, well, by extension, you've also applied it to the subset of the service. So
yeah, true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So like, I feel like this isn't that awful. I don't know that we need to restrict guidance and say we don't support this. We could retroactively add guidance of, we already have a resolved refs condition. We recommend using it in this way with backend TLS policy. And that might be it. But maybe I probably oversimplified the problem.
No, I think maybe it's also just the way I've been implementing it, but it just, like, it's going to suck to implement, because it means that you have to sweep all of the backend refs to check to see if any of them are valid before you can then update the status, because like, you can't sort of go through them and update the status one at a time. Like, you have to sweep them. You have to, it's like, there's a slightly, it makes the architecture of the implementation a bit more complicated, because you've got to do like a sweep and mark and then a update the status. Because because different target refs can end up with different statuses based on the where they roll up to. So if they roll up to different gateways, you can have a different status, because maybe because some things aren't allowed, or or it does work on one, or any of the other sort of conflicted things can happen, right? So yeah. So yeah, okay, well, so yeah, I think, given that, I do think that one of the things we need to mark down as a thing to add is some conformance tests about what happens in these cases. Right now, we have a bunch of great conformance tests for back-end TLS policy. By the way, everyone who's done work on that, I really appreciate it. They are excellent conformance tests. But I think that we need, as always, more conformance tests. But I think that in this case, it's particularly important that we're very specific about having those conformance tests test a bunch of like other problematic cases about multiple target refs, or how they're handled and stuff like that. So that we can lock that behavior in with the tests and then add basically it means that we can develop the tests, agree on the correct behavior, and then update the GEP as a result to sort of specify the behavior. This is definitely one of the cases where I found that writing my own local tests has really helped to understand the bits that are actually quite confusing about how this thing works when you're implementing it. So yeah, I'm okay with leaving it as it is, but I will definitely take an action item to do some documenting of all the stuff that I found as I've been implementing this. So like I think right now probably like it could be that maybe what we need to do is we actually need, like, for this sort of policy thing, maybe we need we've got like the resolved refs condition that sort of is usually for things inside the spec, but we don't really have like we don't have an equivalent of target refs because as Mike said, backend TLS policy is the first droplet we have that has an implicit always included scope. Everything else, the parent ref defines whether or not you set a status. Whereas in backend TLS policy, the target ref does not define whether or not you set a status. So so I think maybe there's some space for an additional condition that's like, target refs resolved or something like that, or resolved target refs or something like that, that is specifically saying, hey, you've got some target refs that don't resolve on that backend TLS policy. You should look at that. And then that would cover like a large part of my concern about this. And that way, like if there is a target ref that does not exist, then that means that every implementation but there is at least one that does, then all you've got to do is be like, hey, like there's at least one target ref that doesn't exist here. I don't care about that. All I need to do is set a target ref doesn't exist condition and call it a day.
Yeah, makes sense.
Maybe that's and that's a good analog to what we have for HTTP route. That does not get rid of the problem that Mike referred to before about status not being set. There's actually a new issue today about where a user has asked the same thing, like what happens when you make a mistake with the parent ref. I think we actually need to add not into the FAQ, but I've added it into my things to document that. We document that if you create a HTTP route and the status does not get updated, you have made an error with your parent ref. Is the sort of that's the flow that we need to remind people to expect here. Is if you create something with a parent ref and any kind of route, and the status does not get updated to say accepted or not accepted, that means your parent ref doesn't point to anything. Fix that. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions there? I've talked enough about it, I think.
No, I think that approach seems well. We should update the notes here.
Yep.
Yeah, actually, well, you're up. Well, actually, no, the next one is relevant to you too. But yeah, I'll talk through the next one a little bit.
Yep.
Because what do you know? More questions about policy and conflicts in status conditions in general. Yep. Damien raised a good thread. Guy already responded to it, so thanks, Guy. So Damien is asking, how do you handle the case with traditional policy attachment where you have more than one layer of policy and you have some kind of merge strategy as Guy has described, and you want to communicate that the one at a higher level has overridden the one at a lower level, and you want to communicate that at both levels, right? You want to communicate at the top level that the one above is overriding something somewhere, and you want to communicate below that some portion or all of the policy is being overridden by something above it, right? Like that's kind of the two phased approach here. And there's already a lot of good discussion on this issue. So um, maybe since I'm the one talking right now, I'll jump down to uh, my probably overly simple suggestion, which is basically like, could we just have two conditions? Could we have an overridden condition and an overriding condition that basically describe that, can be added to the resource above or below? Or if you really want to go crazy in a three-tier hierarchy, you could potentially set both on the same one, which sounds absolutely horrifying, but is technically possible.
Mhm.
This seems like one of the simplest possible approaches, but I know
I think it doesn't quite handle some of the more advanced strategies that
okay.
Guy talks about in his most recent update about like yeah, the difference between atomically overridden versus like partially overridden. But it's definitely an improvement. It's at
Yeah.
least a signal that, hey, something funky's going on here. You need to look into that. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of the time it seems like that's the best that we can do is to give people a breadcrumb to say something is happening here that means that your thing might not work how you expect. Like you should look at that.
Yeah.
That's the best we can do.
That was my rationale for this is that we could settle on two top level conditions and then have more descriptive reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So the reasons might be partially overridden or fully overridden, or like subsets of that, or similar below for overriding.
Yeah.
But if we have an explosion of top level conditions, I think it could get pretty difficult to
Yep.
to
No, I'm
manage.
supportive. I'm supportive of the overridden overriding proposal. To be clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, I would definitely want to hear from some of the other folks who've spent quite a while thinking about the status, like Lynn. Mike, if you got any thoughts about it, you probably spent as much status time thinking about status in general as anybody.
Yeah,
So
I would just plus one to reasons seems to be the right way to do this, whether it's a single condition and we somehow express it rather or the two, but like reasons definitely seems to be the way to address the long tail of like partial and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Okay.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
that was easy. We'll just merge it today.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'll plus one on that so that to make it to record it for the non-video recording. Okay. Well, that moves us to Ricardo. We
Hey,
do have time.
okay, nice. So a quick heads up for folks. We've been discussing offline, and we did this discussion during KubeCon. There is a lot of confusion and ongoing after the Iris Nginx retirement about for Cert Manager and external DNS and other folks. So Kenneth took the lead for the discussion during KubeCon, and it brought the solution for the question of which host name should be used by external infrastructure controllers. And external infrastructure controllers are like external DNS or Cert Manager or whatever needs to know which host name should be used on Gateway API, right? So we do have host names on X routes, but we also do have host names on Gateway. We will have host names on listener set. So long story short, we have decided that the host name that should be considered by external DNS and Cert Manager should be the ones present on Gateway, listener, and listener set host names, right? When listener set is available. I will be writing a get for that. I have already verified with external DNS and Cert Manager. Both of them, they are fine with that. External DNS, they were really actually saying like, we don't mind about breaking it as soon as we have a better definition because our integration with Gateway API is already kind of broken. So it's kind of Okay, cool. And if someone remembers something or wants to discuss something else, or if someone wants to take this gap to write, be my guest. Otherwise, I would probably start writing that next week. And yeah, and
So you're saying
Right.
that we're gonna deprecate host being specified on HTTP route?
no, what
No.
I'm saying is that the host names, they are a definition of a matcher, right? So let's say you have a wildcard on gateway saying like I am *lior.tld, right? Then you have an HTTP route that says like I am user.lior.tld. So this is the matcher of how it should be routed to that HTTP route. What I'm saying is that if you want to use external DNS or cert manager as an admin, you should specify host names on a listener set host name or a gateway.
Yeah, I'm
And
talking
that's
only about the context of external DNS. So
Yeah, so I think the key part here is external DNS and cert manager and anything else that wants to do stuff with host names must look at the listener first. They can look at the HTTP route as well and perform the hostname intersection calculations, right? And it's probably relevant to do so. But if you're not, but if you want those things to work, you must at least set some host name on every listener. That's the first thing that we need to say is right. Like for this to work, it's very important that the host names are set on every listener. That's because you don't want listeners to accidentally pinch host names from others, right? Like it doesn't solve some things. It doesn't solve the problem with the listener set, with the oldest created, and blah 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 blah. Like that, it doesn't solve those things, but it does help. I think that it's very important that we ensure that the host name intersection calculation still has to happen, right? Like if you are doing external DNS and you're generating DNS records, the thing that we're saying is, hey, external DNS needs to look at the gateway to get the listeners or the listener set to get the listeners, and then it can look at the host names and it needs to check that the host names for the HTTP route intersect properly, the same as any implementation needs to. And then it can be like, okay, I've got star.example.com here as on the listener, and then I've got specific 1, specific 2, specific 3. I'm going to create specific 1, specific 2, specific 3 as C names, right? Or as create the A record based on the top one, and then create C names to the one based on the thing, or something like that. You can do that, but the important part is you must have a host name defined on the listener for it to be a valid target for things like external DNS or cert manager. In the case of cert manager, it makes sense that you would say, hey, the host name on the listener, that's your CN, and then the host names on the routes can be SANs. That's okay. But you must have a host name on the listener. Right? That's the key part, I think. Ricardo?
yeah, and I think in the end it does make more sense that like for instance on the registry of the HTTP route, right? So if you want to create a wildcard pointing to your gateway, it's easier if you just set the wildcard. I think that what you have raised, Nick, it's more like the concern about wildcard certificates with OWASP recommendation.
Yep,
But even on
yep.
that, because the owner of the certificate, it's not the route. Like we don't have a definition on the routes for the certificates. It doesn't make much sense to use them, right? The authority
Yeah,
of
totally.
those
Yeah.
CNs or SENs, it is already the host names. So
Yeah, for sure. But so one of the things I also have on my to-do list is to actually write a thing to say, hey, I know that OWASP says don't be careful. It actually doesn't say don't use wildcard certificates, although people tend to read it like that. It actually says be careful when you are using wildcard certificates to ensure that people don't get access to them that shouldn't. We actually designed the host name setup for listener and HTTP routes specifically to give you the option of using wildcard certificates in a safe way. So like it doesn't really apply as much to gateway. So it's as long as you put the secret in another namespace that not everybody has access to, but Cert Manager does, and you use a reference grant, you do a bunch of other stuff, then it is possible to do this safely. Rob.
How do we feel about the case where the gateway doesn't specify a host name at all? Because it can leave it out at MD because you have an HTTPS.
That means all host names. Yep.
Yeah. So let's just imagine that's the case.
Mhm.
Then you basically have to defer to HTTP route, and even HTTP route in that case, multiple HTTP routes in different namespaces can claim.
So
Uh, I guess even that's okay.
so I think what I was saying was I think that we actually should say external controllers that look at host names. If you see a listener with no host name, like that's cool for routing, but you should ignore that, right? Like you should ignore if people don't set a specific listener, then you must ignore them, right? Like that's their fallback, sure. But if you want to be generating DNS records based on a thing, it needs to explicitly set the host name. You can use a star.example.com, but and the thing that does is that at the top level, the infrastructure person or the cluster admin who owns the gateway, they are making a determination about what they're sort of effectively namespacing all the HTTP routes that attach to that listener.
Yeah.
That's so gateway wise, you can still create you can do an easy thing here, right? Like, but the thing here that we want to encourage people to do is to not do that without thinking about it first. And if you're using a tool like Cert Manager or external DNS, you should be thinking about what a host name is visible, and that host name should be like readable from the gateway API without having to go and look up n possible HTTP routes and do a host name intersection computation. That is complicated, and it's only going to get more complicated with listener set because it's now a three-way computation, right? Like so I think that like saying like if you external DNS and Cert Manager and anyone else who is doing stuff based on host names, you must ignore any listener that does not have an explicit host name set. That's the sort of the number one headline out of this to me.
Okay, but like one of the things that I want to make sure is like today, isn't it the case that today people are specifying host names on HTTP routes, and then these host names turned out pointing onto the gateway that exposes them, right? Is this the
Yes.
case
So
today?
yeah. So like that's not going to change, right? You can do that. You can just have a listener with no host name and the HTTP route set the host names, and that means that for HTTP routes you're matching the host header, maybe the authority header if you're using it HTTP2, but like you're matching some header, right? For terminated TLS, you're also matching the SNI.
Yeah.
With the one, and that's one of the other important things here. You are matching the SNI, and once you involve the SNI, it becomes a bit hairier. And so, what we're saying is, if you are actuating changes in other infrastructure based on a host name, you can't. You must have some value of host name set on the listener, right? Like that's all, right? So, I think that we maybe even say you can't just set the star value like to be an explicit like yes everything, because it like, I mean, maybe you can. Maybe that's like hey, I am abdicating my responsibilities. And we can say, well, if you're abdicating your responsibilities, then that means that you are, accepting the fact that maybe you might have a security problem here. Right? Like in the same way that you can do that with reference grant, you can allow access to using a reference grant to anything from anywhere. But that's on you if you do that, right? Like that is not the default. Like if you same as RBAC, if you set your RBAC to be all stars, the security implications of that are on you. Don't do that, basically, is the recommendation. So like, yeah, I think that's the thing I really like about this idea that we can say we can tell external DNS and Cert Manager and record that as part of the Gateway API spec that if you are actuating changes based on host name, that you must set an explicit host name on the listener object, no matter where that listener object is, if it's in the gateway or the listener set.
This makes sense to me. I guess my question is on the status today with external DNS in particular is like I'm asking whether users today are using HTTP only on an HTTP route, and then
They are, but it's broken.
the external DNS controller ends up doing the CNAME to point to the gateway address, basically the gateway that exposed the HTTP route. Is this the case where people are using it today? Because if that's the case, I think it's like
So yeah, like I mean, it's going to be a breaking change for external DNS users, yes, but it is a breaking change that is in service of them ending up more secure, right?
My proposal for them was actually to write a new source of Gateway API instead of breaking the current one on external DNS.
Yeah, okay.
But Sundar said like,
Yeah.
Yeah, but Sandor said like, yeah, we are fine breaking this one. I think I can tag you on the discussion, Lior, if you want, because I have just opened that. I think it would be nice to not break for users, but also if we don't have anyone using, it's fine breaking. I would prefer to do this transition between like whatever they have to a new version of the plugin and tell people like, hey, you should be using this new source, and we are not going to maintain this old one. This can cause you problems and lead to the external DNS admin, which is someone that it's probably privileged on the cluster anyway to fix that, right? To be sure that they are fixing that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Ricardo. Yeah, so look, I'm happy for you or me to write that, Ricardo, but if you do write it, I'll have a bunch of suggestions probably.
No worries.
I already spent a bunch of time thinking about the language you need to use there, so
So that's up to you. I would probably just ask Gemini to write that for me anyway. I'm too lazy to do that. So if something
Okay.
breaks, it's fault from someone from Google. We can blame Rob.
Well, maybe if I can, maybe I'll try and do that in the next little while. I'll do a first pass,
Okay.
human brained, and then we
So
can see
so, so you want to do that?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and Ricardo, can you please make sure you ping me on any of those discussions with the external DNS and Cert Manager folks? I think I've been talking to Cert Manager folks already, but yeah, external DNS as well. Could you ping me?
I will tag you when you are on them.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, well, that leaves us with one more thing. Liam.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes. Hello. I was hoping to start making some contributions. And one of the biggest things that, as a company at least, we kind of need to start moving through to the Gateway API is listener sets. And so being able to have some conformance tests there for confidence would be super duper useful. There's already conformance tests written and coming through. I think Ricardo was going to have a look at that. But I was wondering, number one, are there any additional conformance tests that we wanted to add? Do we want any other documentation? Do we want some help testing it out on various little bits and bobs? What's useful here?
So this is awesome. Thank you. Great to see more folks interested in listener set. The other person who was driving listener set conformance test forward is not on this call, but he was on a previous call, looking for more implementations. Because at that point in time, I think there were 2, and for something to get across the line as GA, we need at least 3. It sounds like you might represent implementation number 3. So if you can present, some kind of evidence that the conformance tests that work actually work for your implementation, that would be very good validation that right now conformance tests have been added and passed by a single vendor, basically, right? So like another vendor coming through and saying, hey, this works for my project, I think is a real good validation. Or if it doesn't, raise some issues. The other thing, I think there was a test plan for listener set. I think there may still be some test missing. Let me see if I can find that real quick. But yes, I think the absolute starting point is just try running the tests and see if it actually makes sense. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is an embarrassing one because I should have reviewed it, but there are others reviewing it. Let me drop a link in. It's PR 4205.
Yeah, I have some blame as well. I've been actually focusing on finishing TLS RAW because it should
Which is
be
also super
easier.
important. So.
Yeah.
Also
it
something we
should be
need.
easier, but
Yeah.
but Rusty is making my life difficult, but on a good way.
Yeah.
But then my plan was actually to finish reviewing listener set gap, the things that we have discussed on KubeCon on the thread tomorrow. But I just didn't went through the conformance test yet because I was worried that we would change something. So I didn't want you to spend time, doing something that would be changed later. That's mostly why I'm holding on the conformance tests right now.
But I think
Yeah.
in terms of conformance tests, I think probably the number one thing that we need to ensure we have really good coverage of that we don't at the moment is testing the conflict rules. We need to be really confident we have very solid tests about what happens with listener conflicts, and also what happens when parent ref conflicts. Like I was talking about with backend TLS policy, what happens if you have a parent ref pointing at the same gateway with different section names? What happens if you have a pointing at the same gateway but the same, like one with the section name, one without? As Rob says, that's kind of a long-winded way to say like or the whole gateway, but we need to figure out, like, you need to have a conformance test to lock in what happens when you do that, right? Like, so that, because again, part of the point of the conformance test is to help people who are trying to implement this do it in that consistent way. And the conformance test can help you sort of be like, oh, that's how it's supposed to work. And so, yeah, like, probably the most important thing, I think, is to look at the thing and be like, what's all the ways that this could go wrong, right? Like, what are all the ways? What happens if this is not specified? What happens if this is a conflict? What happens if this one is non-existent? That's obviously the general approach to writing tests, but like, it's particularly important with listener set where it's reasonably complicated and it's going to be adding a whole nother layer of complexity. So like, the other thing that's important for listener set actually is what happens when I think we wrote down what happens when you specify listeners on the gateway and the same listener on a listener set. Like, I think the answer is like A, don't do that, but B, the gateway wins. But like, I can't remember the exact details, but that is absolutely something that we should be specifying in the GEP and have conformance tests for. And if we haven't specified in the GEP, we should, right? Like, so, and that's one of the ways that writing conformance tests can help us fix the gaps is by like finding error cases that we didn't handle in the current definitions and then handling them by adding in a conformance test that says this is the way to do it, and then adding the language that reflects the reality of that conformance test back into the specification. Okay, my camera's being weird. Yeah, so I think that in terms of like looking at conformance tests, like that would be the number one thing for me to think of. I am planning on implementing listener set for Cilium. I'm implementing backend TLS policy at the moment. When I'm done that, listener set is next on the block for me too. So but like backend TLS policy has proved way more difficult than I thought. So it might be a little bit.
Awesome. And just to be clear, we're an end user rather than a provider, but I'm an implementer. So I'm
So
I won't be.
You can be
Yeah.
installing implementations and checking the conformance tests or writing more conformance tests. Yeah, cool.
I write a lot of code, so I can go and put
Yeah.
PRs in and do all of that stuff as well into implementations if they aren't failing and we plan to use them and stuff like that. So that's perfectly fine. But yeah.
I could also be, I think there may be another third implementation that I'm forgetting. So I wouldn't, it may be that the best use of time is to, nail down the conformance test. That PR I linked has a lot of very detailed proposals for conformance tests, which I am excited about. And if we can get some consensus on that soon, like in the next couple of days, I think that would be a really good next step.
Okay, I will have another look at that then. I think I hadn't looked at it for similar reasons to Ricardo, because like maybe we need to change this yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will have a look at it too.
Awesome, perfect. Then I'll try and install it and test it out. I think we've got Istio, Cilium, and Kgateway and Knative as possible implementers.
Okay, cool. So yeah, Liam, also because we're on the same time zone, I assume.
Yes.
Like, please feel free to ping me in. Like, if you have questions in our afternoon, when no one else is online, please feel free to ping me.
Yep. Australians.
Yeah.
Always around the other side of the world.
Yep. Yeah. Time zones are hard. Okay. Well, so with that, we are currently at the end of the agenda. We have 10 minutes to go. So I feel like we should do a thing that I did at the that I forgot to do at the beginning, which is anyone who hasn't introduced themselves and feels like they would like to, please feel free to. And also, if anyone else has anything else that they want to ask, you got some time. We're all here. But if not, we can call this meeting early. So. Okay, well, let's, Liam. you
Oh
okay?
yeah, no, I was just gonna say hi, and you guys are gonna get sick of me pretty soon. Don't worry.
Nah, man.
You'll learn plenty.
They haven't got sick of me yet, and I've been talking nonstop in these meetings for ages.
No,
That's
I'm
why
well known to
we
be
are
there.
doing those meetings,
Yeah.
on a week that we have you and a week that we don't have you, so we can.
So you have a week to recover from me. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. We're yappers here in Australia, huh?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, look forward to working with everybody and looking forward to finally getting Gateway API like actually moved into our infrastructure locally. We've got like a lot of traffic and a lot of things and a lot of clusters, and we're trying to get it all up and running. And so, yeah, we've got a team that's going to be working on it, and me who's trying to interface with them, and then over here to
Awesome.
make sure everything is getting pushed through and working.
That's awesome. Good to hear.
Using this time and this offer, Nick, I think that one thing that we kind of forgot, but there are a lot of activity ongoing on Ingress to Gateway. I think everybody actually listening to this, we need people to to help on that. I'm not sure if you are gonna say more about that, but we are creating even I guess someone asked a different Slack channel for that. Based on the Ingress Nginx retirement, we need to provide some way of people to move to Gateway API. Also related to that, we started the conversation with Linux Foundation to review all of the certifications. So I think it's worth noting that the Linux Foundation already said like, yeah, we know we need to fix CKA, CKD, and the new network, whatever certification that they are proposing. But anyway, we need some help on Ingress to Gateway. So
Yep.
keep an eye on that.
Yeah,
Thanks,
we're
Ricardo.
currently working on. I'm working with Stephen and Ricardo and trying to figure out how we do some of the provider model for different output providers to make sure that we can move forward with this in a sustainable way. So
Yep.
yeah,
I really
got
appreciate
some
you all doing
ideas.
that. I really appreciate you all doing that. Like as you can tell from me commenting on things, I have opinions, but like I have not enough bandwidth to do actual work on it. So yeah, I appreciate you all as always for listening to me. Okay. One more final call. I'll give you a count of 5 this time. Please feel free to speak up if you have anything, but I don't want to hold us all around sitting here doing nothing. So
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.
bye everyone. Thanks. Cheers. Bye.